what we want to do is this time is really for people who are looking into entering our challenges, to learn some more about the topic areas and ask questions. So that the time is really yours. What we have a guest here today. We have Lewie Lawrence, the Executive Director of the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission. Welcome, Lewie. He's going to be, he is really the progenitor of a lot of the topic areas we're going to be talking about today. Lewie's based in the Middle Peninsula, which is a rural section of coastal Virginia that is really front and center for a lot of rural coastal community resilience threats. So we're going to talk through some of those. At any time, feel free to raise your hand electronically, ask any questions. That's what we're here for, or you put them in the chat. Well, we'll try and pick them up, but I'm going to be looking at my other screen here as we go forward. So we'll start here. I'll share my screen and we'll go into our website, and then I'll bring Lewie in just to talk about a couple of the topic areas as we get into this, if there are no questions to begin with. So here we have the website that you are familiar with. You should be seeing that. We have two challenges, the rural and the urban challenge. We talked about the urban last week. The rural one you can get to by clicking on this, or you can scroll down to here. Under rural, there are three topic areas: flood management, protection of buildings, and property. We'll go first of all to the flood management section. So Lewie, if you want, we can just run through each one. If you wanted to give 30 seconds or a minute or so of your take on on each one of these problems as you see it from your community. Why don't you go ahead and do that, and we can answer any questions as they may come up.
Sure, that works.
Okay.
So again, I'm Lewie Lawrence. I'm the Executive Director for the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission, and I'm also staff for the Middle Peninsula Chesapeake Bay Public Access Authority. The Access Authority is a really unique political subdivision in the Commonwealth, and it happens to hold title to thousands of acres of waterfront land scattered all over the 6 counties of the Middle Peninsula. And as we've been building this portfolio of properties, we look for different ways of addressing as many different public policy challenges facing our communities. And these properties serve as what we're calling laboratory test beds for dealing with these resiliency challenges. These properties are inundated with water, and water is our biggest threat right now. But we also view water as an asset, and it creates the opportunity for us to deal with some pretty complicated problems that are not going away. So the flood management challenge is really focusing on problems that we see not only within the Middle Peninsula, but the larger Commonwealth. And the first one is living shoreline vegetation production. Since the General Assembly has decided that living shorelines are the preferred method for dealing with shoreline and flooding challenges, there presents a bottleneck for having access to the correct type of shoreline plants for living shorelines. And so we end up having this portfolio of properties that will create an opportunity for entrepreneurs to think differently about how they may want to utilize land to produce plants or harvest plants to be able to meet the demand that will become an exponential growth curve opportunity. So a couple of examples, which I know Paul's got in the website there. We've got one project in Matthews County. It's associated with the Dredging project that's going to need 65,000 plants. We don't believe that there are 65,000 plants for sale in Virginia totally right now. And that's just one project. And if you begin to look at all of the different projects that VMRC permits, and if everyone has to have a component of living shoreline plants, how is Virginia going to meet this demand? And that's what this portfolio of properties can help people that have an interest in wanting to do things with shoreline nurseries. We can offer you a place to think differently about how do you enter that marketplace. So that was the first one there. What was the next challenge that we had in there? Ditch drainage. Yeah. So in anywhere in the Middle Peninsula and on the Eastern Shore and to some degree the Northern Neck, everything is flat. And most of the rural ditching systems were dug during the colonial period. And over the last 100 to 200 years, subsidence and sea level rise has made most of our ditching systems no longer operational, whether or not that's VDOT ditches or outfall ditches. And when water doesn't move, it begins to impact the land around it, which impacts the tax base. So much of what we're talking about today has a goal from our perspective of protecting the tax base. So looking at different ways to move water through the rural ditching system and ways of monetizing different methods of moving water through the rural ditching system helps to protect local government's tax base. So we are open to any type of innovative idea and approach that can move water differently than allowing and waiting for gravity to do it, because gravity is not going to do it anymore.
Okay, so those are the flood management. We'll get into the protection of buildings. Just to reiterate, what Lewie is saying is that there are pilot sites available to host and to test solutions, and so this makes it very different from our urban challenge, and it could be a really great opportunity for companies to take advantage of. So this is in our protection of buildings and property, the use and application of dredging materials. You want to talk to that, Lewie?
Yes, sir. So this one, it may stretch your mind a little bit, but to give you context of what we're talking about here, when Congress defunded shallow water dredging, it created what we like to refer to as the stoplight effect for all waterways in the Middle Peninsula, even on the Eastern Shore and the Northern Neck. And when the stoplight is green, that means maritime traffic can get in and out. Most of our rivers and creeks are either blinking orange or they've turned red. And that means that commercial vessels and recreational vessels can't get in or out. And for every foot of water depth that's lost, there's about a 15 to 16% change in real estate values, which means it could be negative or positive, depending on if you have water depth or you don't. Then that means local government can no longer generate the revenue that's necessary to fund governmental services. Okay, so if you wanted to dredge all of these creeks on any type of interval, that's a lot of material. So we've got over 100 creeks in the Middle Peninsula alone that need dredging. To give you some idea of how much material we're talking about, that's 40,000 dump truck loads of dredge material. Dredge material historically has been viewed as a waste product, and we need to stop viewing material that's associated with activities along the waterfront as a liability. So dredge material becomes an asset, and elevation is what we need because we are combating subsidence and flooding. So we are looking for ways of using all of this material that will be needing to be removed over the next few years to keep our waterways navigable. How do we do that? Can we use it to make concrete? Can we use it for cosmetics? Can we think differently about building insulation? Can we use it for flood mitigation berms to help accelerate nature-based flood mitigation strategies? We really want to think more holistically about what do we do with the material when we take it out? Where do we put it? And how do we use it? And how do we add value to it? Historically, it just goes into either a landfill or on public property and collects phragmites. It is not recognized as an asset. And we think that is extremely short-sighted. We believe that we can deal with flooding challenges on both state-owned secondary roads and private roads by using this material in a way that adds elevation. So that's what this challenge is about, is thinking about how do you recognize that there's all sorts of free construction material with a really high salt content that's going to be available for use.
Okay. We will keep going here. Let me see, I missed one out, sorry.
Yeah, property design. So water, when it's moving onto the landscape, either through coastal flooding, storm surge, subsidence, or the water table, it's going where Mother Nature is going to move it. And it doesn't recognize that people live there. So we have to learn to adapt to the water that's coming in, which means we need to be modifying the landscape. We need to be thinking more holistically about how do we design our communities in this center to keep people living in this space for as long as possible. We hear a lot about managed retreat, but that is not going to happen as long as the banking industry will lend money and the insurance industry will insure. So as long as those two predicates are there, people are going to live in high hazard areas. And so we have a responsibility under the protection of public health, safety, and welfare to figure out how do we live in this space for as long as possible, which means we need to think more holistically about managing land and water quality and resiliency. And so these properties that we own, including the buildings, all are subject to flooding. And so it creates a wonderful laboratory for innovative solutions that can be applied more holistically across the coastal zone. And so I'll give you a context. We hope over the next probably 2 weeks, the state master plan to deal with coastal flooding is going to be released. You will see in rural communities, in the Middle Peninsula in particular, over the next 30 plus years, there will be a 5,000% increase in the number of structures that are exposed to coastal flooding. 5,000% increase. That presents a tremendous business opportunity to help deal with that taxable asset, to protect it against flooding and to keep that asset viable for as long as possible. I think that's got it for the coastal design. Yeah, same thing with existing building rehabilitation. We are seeing a shift in how people view owning assets along the coastal waterfront. The Access Authority has been donated almost $4 million worth of waterfront property, buildings, and houses. That presents a new way of exploring how do we provide residential units under a different type of property ownership framework. Meaning most houses that are built have a life cycle of about 100 years. Well, in a lot of these coastal communities, 100 years, you're not gonna be able to build there anymore. So we need to think differently about the types of residential housing that we build, the way that foundations are structured as it relates to FEMA regulations, and then how do we move those structures back? And having a growing portfolio of publicly owned waterfront properties allows us to test what that next generation of buildings might look like that can live with the water and also be moved as the life cycle comes to an end, not because you've amortized out the value of the structure, but because Mother Nature has decided you can't live here anymore.
Okay, and finally on this section is the property accessibility.
Yeah, that's the same. It's interrelated to the dredge material.
Yeah.
Most of all of the roadways that service rural communities are at a really low elevation. And we've got to think differently about how do we move goods and services and fire and rescue to people that live in a higher hazard area, recognizing that these roads are inundated at a much, much higher frequency. And so that's going to require thinking differently about how do you add elevation, how do you control water moving through the ditching system, over top of the roadway. It just presents an opportunity to recognize that these roads are the only ingress and egress for many of these rural coastal communities. They're privately owned assets. Some might be publicly owned assets, but people still have to move through them. And how do you manage that?
Okay, and we'll move on to the third quality, the third topic area, and that's water quality management, septic system design.
Sure. So once you get out of an urbanized area, septic waste is handled on site. And up until the year 2000, all the septic systems were gravity fed systems. They run around $2,000 to $4,000, not a terribly expensive investment. After the year 2000, the General Assembly allowed for engineered septic systems to go in, and the regulations between the water table and the top of the dirt changed. So it made land that was more subject to recurrent flooding eligible for development. So essentially overnight, you had a significant change in the number of residential septic systems that went into higher hazard areas that were subject to inundation from flooding. These septic systems are mini sewage treatment plants. They cost anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 a pop, and they don't do well when Mother Nature decides that she's going to bring 5 feet of salt water on top of it. The computer brains short out. They're not insurable. So this challenge is thinking through, how do we manage wastewater in an environment that isn't dry anymore? Meaning, if we're going to use secondary treatment, how do we elevate everything, including the treatment unit and the drain field and the holding tanks, in a way that reduce the likelihood of it being flooded, which reduces the functionality and helps against damage that's not insurable. When you lose electricity in rural communities, engineered septic systems are not operational. Gravity-fed systems always remain operational. You can always go down to the creek and you can get a 5-gallon bucket of water and you pour it in the toilet and flush, and it works. Engineered septic systems do not work that way. When the power goes off, you can't flush. So we need to recognize that some of this also involves thinking more holistically about the electrical supply that is related to septic system redesign.
Okay, and we'll continue. Number 2.
Yeah, drinking water. So this is a related issue. As we have so many wells and septic systems that are down on the water's edge, you're seeing through the water table, both for shallow water and deep water wells, saltwater intrusion. When that happens, it's not as drinkable, or the amount of clean water is reduced. So the head pressure or the wells are not producing at the level necessary for single family water consumption. So we want this challenge to think differently about, how do we manage drinking water coming in higher hazard areas? Can we separate it out so that some of the gray water is utilized differently so that we can reduce consumption overall, and that we can make it a little bit easier for people to continue to have drinking water in areas that are not serviced by municipal systems?
Okay, so that is that's a summary of the challenge areas that we have. And I'm so glad that we recorded that, because you will not get a better summary of these challenges than from Lewie. So thank you, Lewie, for that. So we'll open it up to questions now. I think we start off with one. Jorge, you got a question?
Yes, thank you so much, Lewis, for the description of the challenges. I have a couple of questions, actually. Let me just run them quickly by you. I know the time is limited for the other participants. So the first one, very concrete, is living shorelines. So can we propose solutions that are not nature-based, but can be integrated with nature-based to perhaps complement, potential, shortcomings that nature-based solutions may have in navigability or accessibility? Is that acceptable?
I would say it would be acceptable because state law now requires that any shoreline resiliency-based project has to incorporate elements of a living shoreline if you cannot build a living shoreline on the site, so that there are gradients that can be brought into that space. Yes. So I think that there is, I would recommend considering putting that proposal in so that we've got an idea to figure out how do we shape it around what the current regulatory process requires.
Perfect, exactly.
Yeah, Jorge, just before you go on here, just a clarification for everyone. These topic areas are areas of interest, obviously, but you're not required to fit into only one. We're very interested if you can fit into more than one, but also if you have an idea that doesn't necessarily fit directly into any one of these topic areas, but you still think that it has that it has a general fit to the rural communities. Feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about it and give you some guidance on that. But you're not required to fit exactly into only one of these topic areas. You're more than welcome to spread them out and even go beyond.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Jorge.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, the other two questions quickly, what about the drainage? You were saying that only solutions to move the water, but I guess based on what you just said, you know, you're welcome, you're open to see, to hear to other type of solutions that help to that challenge, right?
Absolutely.
And one thing that I saw on some of those challenges is about the what is called like the expectation for the lifespan of these kind of solutions. You're saying like 15 years or more. I don't know if I understand this correctly, but are you looking for solutions that actually, I mean, sometimes some of these solutions are planned to be to endure like, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 years, 70 years, whatever. But I was just curious about this time frame of 15 years only. I don't know, can you elaborate on that a little?
I think from my perspective, each of the challenges life cycle is going to be different because it depends on what the solution is as it relates to, is it a solution that helps to protect the environment, which will exist a lot longer than people living in that space? If the solution is related to keeping people or infrastructure in that space, then it may have a shorter time period because Mother Nature may decide, you're not living there anymore. I'm going to take it away.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. No, great. That's what I wanted to know about. And yes, I guess following up to what Paul was saying, I guess that's okay that we reach out to you to run by you some of these concepts and perhaps find a perfect fit for the application instead of just waiting for the application and apply for all of the challenges that we have in mind.
Yeah, I would think so, Paul. Would you agree? I mean, the more you refine it, the easier it's going to be for the review process. Perfect.
Yeah. No, that's all the questions that I have.
As we have those discussions, they don't come with any guarantee of any beneficial treatment down the road. They're just informational.
Informational, yes, that's right.
Information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone else on the webinar?
In the rural drainage improvement, hi, this is John Gradick. Is it mainly about controlling the water flow? Where do nutrients fit in, you know, in the top 2 or 3 of that? Is it nutrients water flow, or is it water flow nutrient, you know?
Well, it depends, because you've got water that's moving through these rural drainage systems coming from 2 different directions. You've got surface water, rainwater runoff, and then you've got tidal backflow. And you could have any combination of those happening at any given moment. But one thing that always happens is that the ditch, if it's rain flow coming off of the landscape, you've got nitrogen that's either moving through, that's moving through the system naturally, or is moving because of the sheet flow into the ditch system. So the nitrogen is locked up in the soil in many cases because it's been deposited because the water doesn't move, or it moved through the system and it's just there naturally, because a lot of the nitrogen that you're finding in the soil may have gone on to these agricultural fields 100 years ago, and it just took that long for it to move through the system. Or you've got the sheet flow effect of nitrogen that's there. So the removal of nitrogen presents an opportunity to think differently about monetizing nitrogen removal. And so it begins to bring in the nutrient removal program that the state has developed and linking that with the need to manage water moving through the system. So it's a different way to monetize and add value to an asset that's underperforming and currently is not recognizing as having any monetary value.
Okay, understood. Does any of that apply to urban stormwater as well?
We have no MS4 areas within the Middle Peninsula. There are no MS4 areas.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's all unregulated.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hey, this is Russ Burke. I'm very interested in a number of these different categories. I like the idea that we can put together projects that address more than one.
Yep.
And without trying to reveal too much of my own hand here, something that kind of strikes me, and I'd like to open up to anyone who's listening, because maybe there's an opportunity for a partnership, because collaborations are welcome as far as I'm concerned. But for this really significant demand for living shoreline vegetation production and this issue with rural drainage, might there be a way for us in a somewhat decentralized way, but with maybe some oversight from Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission or a similar organization for us to coordinate where we could be thinking about both of those issues simultaneously? Maybe we could use that water to grow those plants in a systematic way that allows us to get access to state and federal funds that maybe is not traditional, like not conventional. But so I guess that's not a specific question. It's just kind of something for us to think about, because in every jurisdiction there are these wetlands boards, right? And they can make or break all of your dreams for permitting projects, and they're aware of each other, and they have a lot of collective experience amongst the members. And I'm wondering if there is some potential there for coordinating amongst all the wetlands boards within this region to seek some sort of innovative approach to these two issues simultaneously. So I don't know, sometimes I'm off the wall crazy, but it seems like these two things are issues that aren't going to go away, and that we are going to need to address them probably side by side. So any thoughts from the rest of the attendees, or from Lewie or Paul?
Yeah, I would say, Russ, with that, I would encourage all of that, because rewiring, and put that in air quotes, rewiring how the system works is going to be critical to making these solutions, exploring whether or not these solutions can work. Can they be monetized, and can you add value and create jobs? So a lot of times when I'm talking about the ditch draining, when we're talking about thinking really outside of the box, the example that we've used, one example that we've used in the past is, just because the ditching system, the way it exists today, isn't the way it needs to exist tomorrow. So to your example point, can you replumb the ditching system, direct all of that water into an impoundment, and create a public refuge for waterfowl hunting? So you're using that water differently to create an environmental benefit that creates a recreational opportunity. And maybe you flood public access authority properties to create that impoundment area. So that's what I'm talking about when we want responders to have no fear of putting innovation down on paper. Be as creative as you possibly can, so that we can look through and evaluate and go, that one is really creative, and that may have some good legs on it.
Well, so what I would back up what Lewie is saying is I would agree as well, but understand that you have to actually, these are not R&D, so paper competitions. You're going to have to perform. You're going to have to build one of these things. So make sure your idea, your thoughts, and your technology is advanced enough that you can actually make it demonstrate how it works full size during the performance period of the challenge. So, but by all means, think outside the box. Just make sure you've got enough time to build the box.
Thank you.
Okay. We're a little bit over, but we keep it going if there's any other questions. Yeah, Queenick, let me see here. You have a question. Live in Alexandria and here to learn more about what others are doing to mitigate and build resiliency against stormwater. So no questions here, but there's a fantastic project. So Thank you, and thank you for your participation. Feel free to reach out to me at any time, Quinnick, with any other questions. I'd be happy to put you in touch with Lewie and his folks if you needed any additional information or any help. So if there's no other questions, I will let everyone go. Thank you so very much, Lewie. Thank you so much for your explanations and your information and your time. I know it's very helpful to everyone. So thank you.
Sure.
And thank you all for all participants for taking the time today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.